California has taken a big step forward in the electric car revolution, banning the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles in the state by 2035. So what do investors need to know about how this will affect the industry? For more, let's go to Jessica Caldwell. She is Executive Director for Insights with Edmunds. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us. Let's first talk about the state of the market. I mean, we have been seeing so many Teslas on the road, certainly where you are, for years and years, and everyone's talking about the new Ford Lightning, as well as a number of other startup electric car companies like Lucid, for example. But how much of the market really is electric right now?
Across the United States, it's not a big percentage. If you look at battery EV sales this year, they're around 5% of pure EVs. So not a big percentage. And this is a technology we've been talking about for over a decade. We've seen these cars, but it finally feels like now we're kind of on the cusp of something big. We don't know exactly what the effect of that is yet, but it definitely feels like the products are finally coming. So I think the question here is, are consumers ready to pony up and spend the money? We know the past few years have been quite difficult in that regard, and to kind of see if the infrastructure will support increased sales. But if we look at the market as it is, it's still a very small percentage of total new vehicle sales.
In terms of spending the money, we've started to see price increases, right? Ford is raising prices for the Mach-E. It's already raised prices for the Lightning, and not unsubstantial amounts. We're talking about $3,000, $4,000, $7,000, $8,000 price increases. These vehicles, I think, at least the smaller ones were affordable before, but the bigger ones, like the trucks, can get up to $100,000. Are they making any margin on those?
Yes, I mean, I think that's what it's all about, really. I mean, there's been so much demand for these vehicles this year. I mean, I don't even think you can get on a reservation list right now for a Lightning. So if you really want one, it's pretty hard out there. So I think they're probably responding to the demand that they see. I mean, we've seen a lot of price increases also for Tesla products over the course of the past year, and just the market in general. I mean, if we look at new vehicle prices, they really have skyrocketed. I mean, the average new vehicle is about $47,000 right now, which feels much higher than it ever has been historically. And new EVs are over $60,000. So it is not a cheap game to buy a new vehicle, particularly an EV.
Fortunately for now, you get $7,500 back from Uncle Sam, and a lot of local markets also give you some sort of tax rebate. How long is that going to last? I mean, I've heard that starting next year, you're going to have to buy cars that are made in America in order to get that, and that you're going to have to buy cars that have battery components also made in America.
Yes, next year is where it starts to get really tricky, because not only are there requirements for the vehicles themselves and their components, like their battery, the battery elements, as well as where the vehicle is assembled, there's also requirements on income levels. So if you're someone that is, you're a married couple and you make over $300,000, which may seem like a lot of money, but if you think about these vehicles are $100,000, it really isn't. You're not going to be eligible for those rebates, which is a bit difficult. And the same thing for the used vehicles. So that's what's interesting and new, is that we're going to start seeing used rebates for EVs, about $4,000. Again, income requirements. So all of a sudden, this market, which didn't really have too many rules in terms of the rebates, is going to get really strict, and it's going to be pretty hard to figure out if your vehicle qualifies. There's going to have to be VIN decoders to figure out if your vehicle has the battery components, and the vehicles. Automakers have a few years to ramp up to get these things set in place. Obviously, this cannot change overnight, but it's still going to be a tough challenge for them as well as consumers.
Yeah, because as of right now, none of the electric vehicles comply with the new regulations in terms of, the raw materials coming from the U.S. or the batteries being built in the U.S. They're going to have to change that. Are they, do you think, those companies building electric cars in the U.S., like GM, like Ford, like BMW, are they going to have to revamp the way they source these materials?
Yes, a lot of the companies, there's a lot of pressure on them to revamp where they source these materials. I mean, we know that there's a lot of factories being built as we speak, or building factories very soon. So that's definitely something that's in play. But in terms of sourcing some of these minerals, the mining that goes into it, that's a little bit different. That's something that takes, from what I understand, a very long period of time. You can't just change that overnight. I mean, none of these things you can really change overnight, but that is even more sensitive to time. So yes, in terms of where they get these natural resources, they're going to have to put a lot more effort into it, which is tough. I mean, it's not, they don't have to be 100% next year. There is a time frame associated with it. It's like 40%, 60%, 100% eventually. So they do have a bit of a time window, but that seems like that is going to be quite challenging and not something that they would have absolute control over. I mean, automakers, their specialty is designing, building vehicles, not necessarily figuring out where these resources come from and sourcing them and doing everything that involves. That's definitely adding a challenge to what is already a challenging scenario.
Let's talk about, Jessica, the players here. I mean, Tesla seems to have an advantage still in terms of the range. I guess that's the battery plus the software. But how long do they hold on to that?
It's going to be challenging for Tesla to hold on because they kind of have been this big fish in a small pond for a very long period of time. They have the cool brand factor, which you cannot underestimate, but as we know, that doesn't last forever. And all of a sudden, we have a lot of competitors that are finally getting serious and making cool cars. I mean, even somebody like Hyundai with their Ioniq 5. We see Tesla shoppers looking also at Hyundai. And what world did that seem like that was going to happen a few years ago in terms of brand? And we see that now. So I think that they're still going to be fine. They're still going to make a lot of cars, sell a lot of cars. But in terms of their market share of the EV market, of course, that's going to slip tremendously over the course of the next decade.
Who would have guessed 10 years ago that everybody would want a Kia Telluride? But they're pretty awesome. In terms of the incumbents, you know, GM has the Bolt, plus they've brought out the Hummer, kind of a barbell strategy there. They're coming out in the middle with other offerings. The Silverado EV is one I'm looking forward to. Ford, of course, has the Mach-E, and they've got the Lightning, which is probably the most talked about electric car since a Tesla. BMW has some exciting products. Dodge even announced a new, I think, Challenger that's going to be electric. Which one do you think is going to lead the charge as this ramps up?
I think initially, because they've spoken the most about it, they have the platform, the Ultium platform. I think GM is sitting in a good place. They're very upfront about the vehicles. We know that there's a Blazer, an Equinox that is supposedly coming out for $30,000, which can really change the market a lot if they can get to volumes. We know the Silverado's coming, the Cadillac Lyriq, even the Celestiq, a bit expensive, but it's going to create some excitement. So I feel like they have talked the most about building high volume vehicles at lower price points, which is what this market means. Some of the other automakers, they have, you know, some really cool cars and cool concepts, but I feel like GM is probably hitting volume niches at this point a bit better than the others.
What about the startups, Jessica, especially companies that seem to be struggling to produce the kind of quantities that are necessary to stay in this industry? Which ones do you think will survive?
That's a tough question. I think all of them are a bit tenuous, to be honest, just because we know that it's challenging for these automakers that have been around for decades, if not, you know, over 100 years making cars to operate in this environment, to change, especially in light of some of the new, requirements on with the Inflation Reduction Act. That's going to be tough for these established automakers that have very deep supply chains, relationships, all those things needed to make this work successfully. So some of these new players, I think that it's hard for them to be in volume. I think that's going to be the struggle. Even someone like Rivian, who product is cool, can't fault that, love the vehicles, but even competing against a GM and Ford at what they can offer in terms of price points is going to be tough. So they're going to have to rely a lot on brand, being new, being fresh, somebody like VinFast as well, kind of having a different spin to the market, which will appeal to a certain sector. I just think it's hard to get to volumes with those type of players.
Right, they've got to actually deliver the product. And if you want Lucid, or if you want a Bollinger or a Canoe, you're going to have to wait a long time, if not forever. The Cybertruck is one, I know people have been waiting years for this to come out. Is it ever really going to come from Tesla?
Who knows? I mean, yes, I feel like we've seen this ages ago. It was like anything that happened pre-pandemic feels like it was 100 years ago. And that was certainly in this category. I think eventually, I mean, it's probably hard for Tesla to prioritize considering there is so much demand on their other product. I just don't know why maybe you put the resources into that if you can barely kind of keep up with what you have. I think more importantly, they probably have to work on refreshes on some of the existing models like the Model 3, the Model S, pretty long in tooth at this point.
Mm.
But I do think the Cybertruck will eventually come. Not sure if it's going to be an exact model that we saw Elon drive around and try to crush the doors in, but it feels like it will come. I mean, honestly, who knows when though?